Do you want to do the famous Camino de Santiago? I have the same idea, and today I will share my story with you. Back in 2018, I walked around 400 kilometers of the Northern Way, and when I finished, I wanted to add more kilometers to my journey. I haven't gone back yet, but I know I will do, because as many say, the Camino always calls you. There are a few things that not many told when planning to do the Camino de Santiago. A big one is logistics. How long does it take? Where do you start? Where can you sleep? What about the food? What are the conditions of the route? Are there more than one route? How fit do you need to be to actually do it? And what about the challenges you can face once you are already on the route? There are many questions that just cross your mind. Today I will share my story, so then you can know a little bit of how you can plan your route, where can you stay, the importance of being flexible. I'm not talking about physically flexible, but more like flexible with your schedule. We will get to that. And also some essential tips that I think can be very useful for you when doing the Camino. So how do you plan your route and where do you start? When I started seriously to plan my Camino de Santiago, the first thing I did was to go to Google and type Camino de Santiago. And when I did that, I realized that there are more than one Camino. So the most traditional one is the Camino Frances, which starts in France and finishes in the holy city of Santiago de Compostela. The route passed through amazing cities and natural areas. I saw how was exactly the route, and I noticed that I was not close to the ocean, and I wanted to be close to the ocean. At least I wanted to see it, even in the distance. And this is how I ended up doing the Northern Way. The Northern Way, or Camino del Norte, is a 825 kilometers trail that takes pilgrims along the breathtaking northern shoreline of Spain. The route begins in the Basque Country and crosses through regions like Cantabria, Asturias, and Galicia, where is located Santiago de Compostela. I knew I couldn't walk 825 kilometers, and I only had 20 days, so I needed to start planning accordingly. I arrived in Santander. I wanted to visit a friend that lived in the region, and from there I took a bus to my starting point. When you start organizing your Camino, you will realize the Camino Frances is the most popular one. The Northern Way is getting popular with the years. You will find more information now than when I did the Camino in 2018. Back then, I decided to buy a book, and it was the best decision ever, because this book, it not only contains information about the Northern Way, it also contains information about the Primitivo, which is another route that also goes to Santiago. So with the help of the book, I started to plan my route. So what I did was I opened the book, I started from the end, from Santiago, and then I counted back more or less like 20 days. And by doing that, I ended up around here in Asturias. And believe it or not, that's the beauty of the Camino, because there are no rules. You can plan and you can start wherever you want. There are recommended stages, and that's very useful for when you want to plan exactly where to sleep and what are the other attractions that you want to see along the way. The Northern Way doesn't pass through Oviedo, but I wanted to make a stop there, so at the end I ended up planning all my route passing through Oviedo. So here you can see the different stages that I choose. And originally, I only planned to walk one day a very long distance for me, 32 kilometers. I say originally because at the end, the last two stages, I changed completely once I was walking. I will share the reason why about this change later. Another point to talk is, where do you stay? You wake up very early, you walk all day, and of course you want to have a very comfy place where to spend the night and recover your energy. So of course you have hotel, hostels, there are different options, but the most common one is to stay in an albergue. So there are public and also private albergues. The good thing of these places is that actually you can stay in a very low price, which is actually very good, because if you plan to walk for 20 days, you want to save some money and not spend every penny that you have in just hotels. But to stay in these albergues, you actually need something called Compostela. The Compostela is like the passport for a pilgrim. So every person that is doing the Camino de Santiago can get this Compostela, and with that, you are allowed to stay in these albergues. Where to stay will depend on your budget, what is the experience you really want to have, and also how good you can handle to stay every night with different strangers in the same room. The prices per night are from 8 to 12 euros. There are a few private albergues and the price is a little bit more expensive, but then maybe you can get in exchange a smaller room or maybe a breakfast in the morning, or even they can organize some dinner for you. One thing though is that some albergues are small, so you really need to get there early in order that you can guarantee that you will have a place where to spend the night. Nowadays, you can actually book the place in the albergue a few days in advance, but in any case, I really recommend to you to arrive early so then you are sure that you will have a bed. Another point to talk is at what time do you start, and also what about the food along the way. I used to be a slow walker, and of course I was walking every day with 6 or 7 kilos in my back. I knew I needed particularly to start early in the days that I wanted to walk more than 20 kilometers, and also when I knew that the albergue was not big enough. Because even if you can book in some albergues, in others you can actually not. So what I did was, like every day when I was arriving to the albergue, I went to the closest supermarket and I bought some water for the way, but also some fruits and some protein bars. But also it's important that you know along the way there are small villages and also larger towns where you can find restaurants, cafeterias, places where you can actually get something to eat and drink. I was already tired every day when I arrived to the albergue, so I didn't really want to cook. But some of the albergues actually offer a kitchen and it's a really nice opportunity to get to know other pilgrims. I know I didn't want to cook, and actually it's a good opportunity to try the Spanish cuisine. Believe it or not, there are more than paellas and tapas in this country. Another point I wanted to talk about is flexibility, and this is not related with what you are thinking of. Actually, it is related with flexibility within your schedule. You plan every day and you really want to keep your days in the way you plan. But sometimes destiny have other plans for you and you need to get along with them. I met, for example, person that got some blisters infected and they needed to stop the way it was impossible for them to walk. In my case, the challenge that I faced was during the first 3 days or so. So I started in Colunga and from there I walked to Villaviciosa. So there in Villaviciosa was the first time I stayed in an albergue. If I remember correctly, I only shared the room with 4 persons more. The next day, I continued my walk to Pola de Siero. Once I arrived in Pola de Siero, so I took a shower, and then when I went out and I was changing, one of the pilgrims in the room looked at my arms and my legs, and then she told me, "I think you have some bed bugs bite." I didn't know what was that. And then I was looking into my phone and I saw the pictures and everything was very disgusting. And of course, everything started itching a lot. So I commented this with the manager of the albergue and he actually asked me to empty my backpack, to really check everything, that I didn't have any animals, that I didn't bring any of them to the room. So I checked everything and I didn't find any bed bug. One recommendation that the manager and also other pilgrims told me is that I needed to put everything I had in my backpack and even the backpack itself in a washing machine and also in a drying machine in a very high temperatures. I couldn't do that in Pola de Siero, so I say, okay, I will just do it the next day in my next stop in Oviedo because, well, it's a bigger city. The next day, I walked from Pola de Siero to Oviedo and it was very, very, very itchy. The first thing I did was to stop in a pharmacy. I just showed my belly and my arms to the personnel in the pharmacy and they recommended an antihistaminic and also some cream. I arrived to the albergue and of course everybody was looking at my arms and my legs. It was very uncomfortable. The lack of privacy you have in the albergues was driving me crazy. So at the end I decided to stay an extra night in Oviedo in a hotel by myself. I didn't want to give explanations to anyone, so I only wanted to rest. So as many things in life, you also need to get the lesson. And what I learned was that bed bugs really like my blood. They also love texturized surfaces because actually they can move. And that is the reason why you are not gonna see carpets in the albergues. Also, almost all the albergues have bed bugs that are made of metal. And also in some albergues, as an extra precaution, they don't allow you to bring your backpack or your shoes inside. You have some lockers outside where you can place everything and then just take with you what you need for the night. So I decided to be flexible with my schedule because, this is not a race. I was not competing with anyone. So the most important thing was that I needed to be fit to continue. One important part of the Camino is the people that you meet along the way. Sometimes you can walk for a few days with the same people, and then after 2 weeks you again meet them in the albergue. So actually it's a nice experience. And also another important thing is the information, valuable information that other pilgrims can tell you. When I did the Northern Way, a lot of the people that I met along the way, they were doing the Camino for a third time, a fourth time. Most of them did the Camino Frances first, then the Primitivo. They did maybe the first half last year. This year they were completing the next of the kilometers. But for me, this Northern Way was my first Camino de Santiago. So actually I would say that I was walking with more experienced pilgrims. When I was on day 11 in Tapia de Casagriego, I was talking with a Spanish guy from Alicante, and he mentioned something that really caught my attention. He told me that the first 10 persons that arrive in Santiago will get a full course meal for free as a courtesy of the Spanish royalty. When he say that, I say, okay, maybe I can do that, but how I will be the first 10 persons knowing that I am a slow walker? So after checking all my possibilities, practice again my flexibility, and I changed the last 2 days of my schedule. I walk from Arzúa to Monte de Gozo, which was actually the longest distance I walked in all the Camino, 34 kilometers. And then I only needed to walk 5 kilometers from Monte de Gozo to Santiago de Compostela. So I wake up a little bit before 4 and I started my walk. And the thing is that when you do the Camino, especially the last 100 kilometers, you walk with so many people. So you can imagine that when you are going to arrive to Santiago, you are not gonna arrive alone. There will be plenty of people arriving with you. So the experience to have that kind of moment just with myself, it was priceless, honestly. I know I will do it again. And I encourage you to do the same, not only to get the courtesy of the Spanish royalty, but also to have kind of like that intimacy with you and the experience by arriving by yourself to Santiago de Compostela. Now let's move to some useful tips. Which time of the year is the best to do the Camino? That really depends on you, of course, but I will recommend it to do it between September and early October. And this is because in summer it can be very hot. Also, you are not gonna walk alone. Trust me, there will be a lot of people on the way. And I will say that when I did the Camino in September, it was very pleasant. The weather was not even so hot, it was not so cold, and I was lucky enough that I didn't experience any rain. Another thing that was a lot in my mind was, will I get lost? What about the conditions of the route? Actually, this didn't happen, and I realized about that once I was a few days in the Camino. There are signs everywhere. Also, I downloaded this app, and as you see, it really have a lot of information about each stage and also covers different caminos. You also can turn on the location and follow all the route while you are walking. But please remember to bring with you a power bank, because with pictures, videos, and the GPS active, your battery is gonna die very early in the day. How fit do you need to be? I trained it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I was going to a gym. Important, with the shoes I was considering in using during the Camino. And this part is really important because you really want to use your shoes and be comfortable with them when walking several days. You will realize that when you are doing the Camino, there is some kind of like inner force that will help you to continue every day. I will say that one of the most challenging parts is actually to carry the the weight on your shoulders every day. But if you don't want to do that, don't worry. There are actually services they offer to take your backpack from one albergue to the other. It is essential also to enjoy the Camino. One thing that I actually regret a little bit about my Camino is that I didn't take enough time to actually see the different places and emblematic monuments. I visit some churches here and there, but I was so worried sometimes that I couldn't get a place in the albergue, or that it was, oh my god, it's gonna get very dark, so I just walk. I think it's also important that you keep in mind that this is not a race. You really need to enjoy the Camino, because you might do the Camino again, but not the same route, so enjoy. To finish my story, I wanted to share with you the certificate that you can get if you also finish the Camino de Santiago. So every day when you arrive in the albergue, you just need to put the stamp, and also along the way, if you visit a cathedral or a church, you also can get another stamp. And if you do that for at least the last 100 kilometers, you can get this very fancy certificate which says your name and also when did you start it, when did you finish, and how many kilometers did you walk, and from which town did you walk. And also you can get this very fancy one in Latin, and if your name is available in Latin, you can get all the certificate in Latin. I would love to know the story of your Camino, and also if you plan to do the Camino in the near future. I will add some useful links. I hope you can find it as useful as I did. Thanks for joining me until here. Happy adventures and see you next time.